Hi, so today we're going to be looking at what you need to get your organization ready for Copilot in Microsoft 365. So let's jump right in. If you've been living under a rock, let me quickly go over Microsoft 365 Copilot. It's the use of Azure OpenAI with your Microsoft 365 tools, which works alongside you in the apps that you use every day, that combines the power of the large language model with your organization's data. And it's all within the flow of your work, making you more productive. So Microsoft has some great products. They're rich, they're powerful, but most people only use about 10% of the app's capability. So the idea behind Copilot is to identify how you work and suggest better ways that you can work, generate new data for you on the fly, and basically unlock the richness of these apps through natural language. It also allows you to upskill yourself and improve yourself by cutting out the mundane. So with that in knowledge, let's jump across and actually have a look at what you need to do to get Microsoft 365 ready. Okay, so quite importantly, who gets it? In order to use Copilot with Microsoft 365, you're going to need a Microsoft 365 E3 or E5 license. Now that's for the big boys on enterprise licenses. Obviously for the small and medium businesses, business standard or business premium are licenses that are required. You'll also need an account, and that account would be in Azure AD. Now, if you're on any of those licenses, you're probably on the Azure AD account in any case. So the idea there, though, is that you're granting access for those licenses in Azure AD, as well as the ability to access your Microsoft 365 apps. So when we're talking about the Microsoft 365 apps, we're talking about services that Copilot wants to interact with, like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneDrive, Outlook. And if you've started using Microsoft Loop, well, then Microsoft Loop as well. It's quite important to understand that you need to be on the current channel or the monthly enterprise channel for those Microsoft apps. Now, what that means is your Microsoft 365 license is actually keeping your apps up to date. If you've installed your own version of Word or Excel or something of the sort, it's not likely to update itself. So you need to be on the Microsoft 365 SKU that is rolling out these changes using the current channel or the Microsoft Enterprise channel. Okay, an area that I'm not particularly good on in networking and access. So Microsoft 365 is made up behind the scenes of a bunch of endpoints. Think of it as the APIs that you use to connect to things like Exchange and Teams and SharePoint. They all have a range of IPs that they run over, and those all need to be accessible. So obviously talking to your infrastructure team to enable or make sure that none of those endpoints are closed down is going to be of utmost importance when working with Copilot. Then into an area that I really know nothing about is WebSockets. But basically, your device needs to connect through to Microsoft 365 and for Copilot to work. And WebSockets must be unblocked in order for that to happen. Finally, a lot of this functionality is going to be made available through collaboration in Teams. And so from the admin center for Teams, you need to enable certain plugins, which is going to allow this functionality to persist. Okay, moving across to more information that you need to know about. And I think this is important in any case. If you've got a Microsoft 365 instance, it's important to know this and to follow best practices here. So we're firstly going to talk about permissions. And specifically, you can grant permissions via AD groups, but in most environments of SharePoint and Microsoft 365 that we look at, that is not necessarily done very well, where people are just provided access into sites willy-nilly. So it's very important to understand in terms of permissions that Copilot has access to anything that you have permissions to. which means that content oversharing could become a major source of problem within your organization, because some people don't know that they've got access to information that they shouldn't have access to. And suddenly this will be percolating up to the top in an AI tool, and that is a bit of a problem. So with Microsoft 365, it follows all of the specific principles around your normal access. So you need to look at using AD groups to provide access into certain workloads in Teams, in OneDrive, in SharePoint, and using the best practices around those permissions. In terms of security and data residency, this is going to be a question that I'm sure is of utmost importance to a lot of people, because now we're utilizing Microsoft 365 Copilot, which is built on Azure's OpenAI. Now, it's quite important to notice the difference here between Azure OpenAI versus OpenAI, which is providing ChatGPT. Azure OpenAI is the service that is run by Microsoft on their Azure services. It is private to your organization. Now, Microsoft is following the foundational principles for AI. So it's built on the comprehensive approach to security, compliance, and privacy. That being said, none of your existing organizational data will be used for training any of the models. And as mentioned, the system is provided through Azure OpenAI, not on the open services of OpenAI. You can imagine with all of these people logging on to Microsoft 365 now and using basically ChatGPT for their company data, that there is going to be a lot of resource being used. Now, the calls into your large language models are always made into your own region, but in circumstances where there might need to be more compute power, those calls can be pushed to other regions. It's important to understand that none of your data will ever be stored outside of your region. So wherever you've got your Microsoft 365 tenant, the data is only stored there. You'll also know that the Copilot experience is using your organizational data to interact with things like calendars, emails, chats, documents, meetings, contact. We can carry on going. And it's important to note that none of that data is used for any of the models outside of your organization. The tools, though, are only as powerful as what Copilot can search. So the more information you have in Microsoft 365, the better the connections and relationships that can be built. So Microsoft has implemented what's basically called semantic index, which looks at all of the information within your tenant and then provides that information back as context within Copilot. So the more information you have there, the more information that's indexed within Office 365, the better your Copilot productivity experience will be. Then when it comes to license management, very important to know that you can manage the licenses for Copilot. So you can turn it on and off for certain individuals within your organization. Obviously, all of that licensing does require the E3, E5 business premium or business standard licenses. But the licenses themselves can be administrated through the admin center. There is also the ability to provide users access into their licensing through AD groups. So if you're following those best practices and permissions up above that we spoke about with AD groups and driving your permissions throughout your Microsoft 365 environment by AD groups, well, then it becomes very easy to manage the licenses for Copilot as well through that same AD group structure. So quite important here is keeping informed. And we've seen all of the changes with AI, OpenAI, ChatGPT, Bard, all flying at us very quickly, and lots of changes in that data on a regular basis, updates, new functionality. So it's very important to keep informed. And there is a messaging center within your Microsoft 365 admin center that gives access into all of the changes and the areas that are being affected with Copilot specifically. Now, a lot of your members of your team that are involved in adoption might not have access to the admin center. In fact, in all likelihood, they won't, because these aren't IT people. These are business users driving that adoption, training, and the like. And they need to keep up to date with what's happening as well. So it is possible to share your message center with a set of users in an AD group, as an example, to allow them to understand exactly what's happening, what the changes are, without them needing access into the rest of the admin center. With all of that in place, you're good to go. We should be ready to start using Copilot as soon as it's rolled out. And once again, that will be in all of your products, from Outlook to Word to Excel to Teams. And if you're using the Viva suite as well, there are tools for Viva Engage, for Viva Goals, for Viva Connection, whatever it might be, including Viva Glint. All of that functionality is now going to be provided in Copilot. Think of it as your chat GPT for your Microsoft 365 environment. If you need any help on any of this, give GTconsult a shot. Thanks all.